The stars drifted past the wide windows of the diplomatic ship, each one like a tiny lantern in the endless dark. Captain Daniel Reeve stood alone for a moment, looking out into space. He had been many things in his life: soldier, negotiator, survivor, but never a husband. Tonight, that had changed. The wedding had been unlike anything on Earth. No flowers, no music, no soft vows. The Vrella, his new wife's people, had their own way. Tall warriors in shining silver armor had stood into long lines holding ceremonial blades. Surath, his bride, had walked between them, her long dark hair braided with golden rings, her eyes glowing like molten amber. The ceremony had been short, a pledge, a clasp of hands, and a mark burned into the skin on his wrist, a glowing symbol that matched hers. In the eyes of the Vrella, they were now bound for life. Daniel still wasn't sure if he should feel lucky or terrified. The Vrella were strong, proud, and dangerous. They respected humans, but only because humans had proven they could fight and win against impossible odds. Surath was not like the warriors Daniel had met before. She had a calm strength about her, the kind that came from control, not rage. When she smiled, it was small and rare, but it felt real. And yet, Daniel knew very little about her personal life. Their marriage had been arranged quickly, too. Quickly, for political reasons. Now, hours after the ceremony, they were alone in their quarters on the ship. The walls hummed softly with the sound of the engines. Outside, 100 alien ships traveled alongside them toward the Vrella homeworld. Daniel was still adjusting to the thought of sharing his life with someone so different. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, the liquid shimmering, a deep blue in the glass. Strange day, he said, half to himself. Surath tilted her head slightly, watching him. She had removed her armor, but even in a simple robe of dark red cloth, she seemed dangerous, like a sword hidden in silk. It is only the first day, she said in her smooth, accented voice. There will be stranger days ahead. Daniel gave a small laugh. I believe that. Then she stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. There was no warmth in her tone now, only purpose. Daniel, there is something you must do for me. He set down the glass, sensing the weight in her words. All right, what is it? She took a slow breath, as if deciding whether to speak at all. Then she said, I need you to help my younger sister gain experience with males. Daniel blinked, thinking he must have heard wrong. I'm sorry. What? You heard me, Surath said firmly. Her name is Lyra. She is coming to stay with us. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Hold on. Gain experience. What exactly do you mean by that? Surath walked past him, looking out the window at the streaming stars. Among my people, a young warrior cannot lead until she understands the male mind, not only in battle, but in trust, loyalty, and the bonds that form between male and female. My sister has reached that time. She must learn. Daniel frowned. And you think I'm the one who should teach her? I know. You are, Surath replied without hesitation. Humans understand emotions in ways the Vrella do not. You fight for love, not just for victory. You protect those who are weak. These things must be studied. Daniel shook his head slowly. This was insane. He had just gotten married, and now his wife wanted him to. What? Mentor her sister. Teach her how human men think. Spend weeks alone with her. I'm not sure this is a good idea, he said carefully. Surath turned to him, her gaze sharp. It is not a request, Daniel. It is part of our bond. When you took my hand before the warriors, you swore to honor my needs as I will honor yours. This is my need. The air in the room felt heavier. Daniel searched her face, but there was no trace of humor. She meant every word. Why do I feel like there's more to this than you're telling me? He asked quietly, if for the first time. Surath looked away. Perhaps there is. Lyra's training is important, more important than you realize. Daniel's instincts, sharpened by years in the military, told him this was not just about cultural customs. There was something else in her voice, a tension she was trying to hide. Before he could press further, the ship's intercom chimed. A crewman's voice echoed through the room. Captain Reeve. Incoming message from the Vrella High Council. Priority code black. Daniel glanced at Surath. Her expression had changed, not fear, but a sharp, calculating alertness. "We will speak more of this later," she said. Then, as she walked toward the door, she added without turning back, "Prepare yourself. My sister arrives in 3 days." The door slid shut behind her, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. He stared at the closed door for a long moment, then took a sip of the blue drink he had left on the table. It tasted bitter now. He didn't know who Lyra was. He didn't know what experience really meant to the Vrella. But one thing was clear. Whatever he had just agreed to, it was about to change everything. And somewhere, deep in his gut, Daniel felt it, the first quiet spark of danger. The journey to the Vrella homeworld took 3 days. 3 days for Daniel to think about the strange request his new wife had made. 3 days to wonder who her sister was and why she needed him. Surath did not bring it up again. She spent most of her time speaking with council envoys, reviewing political documents, and reading long streams of coded messages. Daniel caught glimpses of her on the ship's private decks, her posture always perfect, her expression unreadable. When he tried to ask about Lyra, she only said, "You will meet her soon. The rest will make sense then." But he wasn't so sure. The ship's corridors were quiet at night. Daniel often walked them alone, his boots clicking on the polished floor. The crew, mostly Vrella warriors, watched him with the polite caution they gave any human. They respected his record as a diplomat and fighter, but respect did not mean trust. On the second night, he noticed a shadow that didn't belong. It was just a head, moving when he moved, stopping when he stopped. When Daniel turned quickly, there was nothing there. No footsteps, no sound. Still, the feeling stayed that someone was watching him. When the ship finally reached the Vrella homeworld, the view was breathtaking. A vast ocean covered most of the planet, broken by chains of black, jagged islands, cities of silver, and glass rose like blades from the water. Ships of every shape hovered above them, their hulls catching the sun. The welcome was formal. High-ranking warriors met them on the landing platform. Surath spoke with them in the sharp, clipped tones of her language, her voice carrying over the hum of engines. Daniel stood beside her, feeling like an ornament in a display. It was there, on the platform, that he first saw Lyra. She stepped from the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who feared nothing. Her hair was shorter than Surath's, her armor lighter, built for speed rather than defense. She was younger, perhaps by 10 years, but there was a brightness in her eyes, a restless curiosity that made her seem even younger. "Daniel," Surath said, "this is my sister, Lyra." Gave a small bow, but her gaze never left his face. "So, this is the human you chose." Her voice was lighter than Surath's, but there was a challenge in it, as if she had already decided to test him. "I suppose I am," Daniel replied, trying to keep his tone even. She smiled slightly, not with warmth, but with interest, the way a scientist might smile at a specimen under glass. That night, the 3 of them dined in the high tower of Surath's family estate. The city lights spread out below, glittering across the dark water. Vrella servants brought dishes Daniel didn't recognize, long strips of meat that shimmered with a silver sheen, fruits shaped like twisting stars, bread that broke apart into steam. Lyra spoke little at first. She watched Daniel carefully, as if memorizing the way he used his hands, the way he moved his eyes. When she finally spoke, it was not to Surath. "Why do humans fight for love?" she asked suddenly. Daniel blinked at the question. "Because love is worth protecting, even when it is dangerous," she pressed. "Especially then," he said. She leaned back, as though filing away the answer in her mind. "Interesting." The rest of the meal went on in strange silence. But Daniel noticed something else. Each time he looked toward the balcony, there was movement just at the edge of sight, a flicker of shadow against the silver pillars. Later, when Surath left to take a call from the High Council, Lyra stood beside him at the window. The city's wind tugged at the loose strands of her hair. "My sister told you why I am here," she said quietly. "She told me something," Daniel replied. "I'm not sure it's the whole truth." Her lips curved in a faint smile. Then, "You are not as slow as I feared." Before he could ask what she meant, she pointed toward a small craft skimming low over the water. Its lights blinked twice in the darkness before it vanished under one of the bridges. "That ship has followed you since you left the wedding," she said. Daniel turned sharply to her. "And you're only telling me this now." "I wanted to see how long it would take for you to notice," she said simply. He stared at her, trying to decide if she was mocking him or testing him. "Who's on it?" "That," she said, "is what we will find out tomorrow when Surath returned." Lyra said nothing more about the shadowed craft, but Daniel's mind was already turning. Whatever this training was supposed to be, it was starting to look like something far more dangerous. That night, as he lay in the guest chambers of the estate, Daniel heard movement again. Not from the hall, from the balcony. He moved silently to the curtains and parted them just enough to see a figure stood outside in the moonlight, completely still. The armor was dark, the helmet sealed. The stance was not Vrella, it was looser, more fluid. Daniel stepped forward to confront them, but before he could speak, the figure gave a slow, deliberate gesture to fingers touched to the side of the helmet, and then they stepped backward into the shadows and vanished over the edge. When he looked down, there was no one there, only the sound of the waves far below. Daniel didn't sleep much after that. The morning air on the Vrella homeworld was sharp and cold, carrying the smell of salt from the endless ocean. Daniel stood on the stone terrace outside his chamber, watching the sun rise over the black cliffs. The city below shimmered in the light, but his thoughts were still on the shadowed figure from the night before. He hadn't told Surath. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he didn't want to sound paranoid, or maybe he wanted to see if the figure would show itself again. Either way, the memory sat in his mind like a splinter. When he turned from the railing, Lyra was standing behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. "You're awake early," she said, eyes fixed on him. "Couldn't sleep." Daniel replied, "Too much on my mind." "Good," she said simply. "You'll need your mind today." Before he could ask what she meant, she tossed him a small, metallic device no larger than his palm. It was oval-shaped, with a faint green glow at its center. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "A translator and a locator," Lyra said. "We're going into the lower district. Not all there speak your language, and not all there are friendly to humans." Daniel turned the device over in his hand. "The Surath know her." Smile was quick, almost mischievous. "Surath knows many things. She doesn't need to know this." Minutes later, they were moving through the city on a narrow skimmer, weaving between towers and over bridges that spanned the rushing ocean currents below. The higher levels were bright and clean, but as they descended, the air grew heavier. The light from the sun dimmed as the towers above blocked it out, leaving the streets in long shadows. Daniel saw alien faces he didn't recognize, not Vrella, but other species from far-flung worlds. Some glanced at him with open curiosity, others stared with cold dislike. "This is where?" Daniel asked. "The part of the city where rules bend," Lyra said, "and where you will show me what it means to be human." They stepped off the skimmer into a marketplace crowded with noise and movement. Merchants shouted in half a dozen languages, selling food that steamed with strange scents and tools shaped for hands unlike his own. Above, wires and banners crisscrossed the sky like a tangled net. Daniel kept his senses sharp. He knew this kind of place, in any world, crowded streets could hide danger. Lyra walked ahead, glancing over her shoulder to see if he followed. At one stall, she stopped to examine a curved blade. "Why do your people value life so much?" she asked suddenly, as if the question was part of the purchase. Daniel studied her. "Because once it's gone, you can't bring it back. And because losing it means losing everything, memories, hope, love, that's worth protecting." She turned the blade in her hand, the metal catching the dim light. "Even if protecting it means breaking your own laws, if the law is wrong," Daniel said, "then yes." Her eyes met his for a moment before she set the blade down and moved on. It was only when they reached a narrow side street that Daniel's instincts sharpened. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the quiet drip of water from overhead pipes. The shadows here were deeper. Lyra didn't seem concerned, but Daniel slowed his pace. His hand drifted to the small knife hidden inside his jacket, a habit from too many years in dangerous places. Then he saw them. 3 figures stepped out from behind a stack of crates, blocking the path ahead. Their armor was mismatched, scavenged, and their eyes behind their masks glowed faintly red. Lyra stopped, her expression unreadable. "Friends of yours?" Daniel asked quietly. "No," she said. "Not friends." One of the masked figures spoke in a rough, garbled version of the Vrella tongue. The translator in Daniel's ear crackled. "Leave the human. Go back alone." Daniel almost laughed. "That's not happening." The figures moved closer, their hands resting on weapons at their belts. Lyra's posture shifted subtly. "Wait." On the balls of her feet, ready to strike. Daniel stepped forward, meeting the nearest figure's gaze through the mask. "If you want me," he said evenly, "you'll have to try harder than this." The fight happened fast. One of the masked attackers lunged at Daniel, but he sidestepped, driving his shoulder into the attacker's chest and knocking them into the wall. Lyra moved like lightning, spinning low and sweeping another's legs from under them. The third attacker pulled a blade, its edge glowing faint blue. Daniel caught the attacker's wrist, twisted hard, and sent the blade clattering to the ground. Lyra kicked it away and pressed her own knife to the attacker's throat. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The attacker only hissed, a sound full of hate. Before shoving her back and disappearing into the shadows, the others followed, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Daniel straightened, his breathing steady but his mind racing. "Random thieves?" he asked. Lyra wiped her blade on her sleeve. "No, that was a message." "A message from who?" She glanced at him, her expression tight. "From whoever doesn't want you teaching me anything, and whoever they are. They'll try again." Daniel looked back down the empty street, the last echoes of the fight fading away. He had the sudden, sharp sense that the shadow he'd seen on the ship had just stepped much closer. The council tower loomed above the city like a blade aimed at the sky. Daniel had seen it from a distance the day he arrived, but standing at its base now, he realized how massive it truly was. Silver walls rose so high they disappeared into the clouds. Guard platforms circled the structure, and every entrance was watched by Vrella warriors in full battle armor. Sarath met him at the gates, her expression cool but sharper than before. "You left the estate without telling me," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Daniel kept his face neutral. "Lyra wanted to see the city, and you thought that was wise." Her amber eyes narrowed. "I thought it was necessary," he replied. "She's supposed to be learning from me. I can't do that if I'm locked in a tower." For a heartbeat, Sarath studied him in silence, her gaze calculating. Then she stepped aside. "The council is waiting. Do not speak unless asked." Inside, the tower's air was cool and faintly metallic. The walls glowed softly with lines of alien script, moving like living patterns. They climbed a winding staircase until they entered a vast chamber. 12 Vrella elders sat in a half circle, their robes flowing like liquid metal. At the center, a black stone table reflected their stern faces. One of the elders leaned forward. "Captain Reeve, you have entered our bond family through Sarath. That bond comes with duties. One is to protect the honor of her name." Daniel inclined his head. "I understand." Another elder's voice was deeper, colder. "Then explain why we received reports of you fighting in the lower district." So that was it. Someone had told them about the ambush. Daniel chose his words carefully. 3 armed individuals blocked our way. They didn't give us a choice." A low murmur passed among the elders. The deep-voiced one spoke again. "The lower district is home to many who hate humans. To be there is to invite trouble. Did you go seeking it?" Before Daniel could answer, Lyra stepped forward from the shadows of the chamber. "I asked him to come with me. I wanted to see how a human would act when threatened." The elders turned, their attention to her. One raised a brow. "And what did you learn, child?" "That humans act faster than most Vrella," Lyra said plainly. "They protect without hesitation, even when they should retreat." Some of the elders exchanged faint smiles. Others looked displeased. The deep-voiced elder leaned back. "This recklessness is exactly why some of us believe humans are dangerous, and why your training must be watched closely." Daniel caught the way Sarath's shoulders tightened at that. Whatever this training really was, it wasn't just a family matter. It was political. When the council session ended, Sarath led him to a private lift that carried them high into one of the tower's spires. She didn't speak until the doors opened into a small room with wide windows looking over the ocean. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said quietly. "And yet you're not surprised someone followed us." Daniel replied. She turned to face him. "You were followed on the ship. I did not tell you because I wanted to see if you would notice." "So it was you?" Her head tilted slightly. "Not me. But I knew." Daniel stepped closer. "Sarath, what's really going on? This isn't just about your sister's education, is it?" For the first time since he had met her, she looked almost conflicted. "The Council fears your kind. They think your ability to form bonds across species is dangerous. They think it will weaken us. Lyra's training is a test. If she sees value in your ways, she will speak for an alliance. If not," she let the sentence fade, but Daniel understood the rest. Before he could respond, an alarm blared through the tower. The windows flashed red as warning lights spun across the city. Sarath's hand went instantly to the weapon at her side. A voice spoke over the comm system. "Unidentified craft breaching defense perimeter. All security to outer platforms." Daniel and Sarath ran into the corridor just as Lyra caught up to them. "It's not a raid," she said breathlessly. "It's an assassin ship. I saw the signature in the lower district yesterday." The three of them pushed through the chaos, warriors rushing to their posts, council members being escorted to safe rooms. Outside, the sky was darkening, not from clouds, but from the shadow of a small, black ship skimming low over the water, weaving between the towers. "That's the one," Daniel said. The ship darted toward the tower, releasing something small and fast. It streaked through the air like a spear of fire, heading straight for the upper spire. Daniel didn't think. He ran. The device hit the spire's balcony, exploding in a wave of white smoke. Out of the smoke stepped a figure in black armor, the same stance he'd seen on his balcony the night before. The assassin moved with impossible speed, drawing twin blades. Warriors surged forward, but were cut down with precise, efficient strikes. Daniel grabbed a fallen warrior's staff weapon, its edge crackling with energy, and intercepted the assassin's next strike. The impact sent a shock through his arms, but he held his ground. "Who sent you?" he shouted. The assassin's voice came through a modulator, cold, almost mechanical. "You don't need to know. You only need to die." The fight was brutal. Sparks lit the air as blade met staff. Daniel ducked, twisted, and struck, forcing the assassin back toward the railing. But the figure moved like liquid shadow, slipping around each blow. It was Lyra who ended it. She leapt from behind, knocking the assassin's helmet away. The face beneath was not Vrella. Pale skin, narrow eyes, and markings Daniel didn't recognize. The assassin hissed, broke free, and hurled a small device to the ground. A flash of light blinded them, and when Daniel's vision cleared, the figure was gone. Diving into the ocean below, Sarath stepped forward, her gaze hard. "They know you're here, Daniel, and they will not stop." Daniel gripped the staff tighter, his pulse steady despite the adrenaline. "Then they're about to learn the same thing I told your sister," he said. "If they want me, they'll have to try harder than this. Would you like me to continue with part 5 so the tension shifts into the dangerous outpost mission and the deeper HFY moment? That's where we can make it even more cinematic for your audience." The sea was restless that morning, waves striking the black cliffs with a sound like distant drums. Daniel stood on the deck of the small patrol craft, watching the white spray rise and vanish into the wind. He'd been given little explanation for this mission, only that he was to accompany Lyra to an outpost on the far edge of Vrella territory. Sarath had argued against it, but the council had overruled her. They called it part of the training. Daniel suspected it was something else. Lyra stood at the bow, her dark hair whipping in the cold wind. She hadn't spoken since they left the city. She only watched the horizon, where jagged islands rose from the mist like teeth. "Finally," she said, "the outpost is surrounded by hostile clans. They raid supply lines, take prisoners, sell them to the highest bidder. It is not a place for hesitation." Daniel leaned against the railing. "And I'm supposed to teach you something out there. You are supposed to survive out there," she replied without looking back. The craft cut through the waves for hours before the outpost came into view, a cluster of steel towers clinging to the side of a cliff. with landing pads jutting out over the water. From a distance it looked abandoned, but Daniel knew better. The place was alive in the way dangerous places always were, quiet, but watching. They docked at one of the pads, where a single Vrella guard waited. His armor was dented, his eyes sharp with suspicion. "Orders," he demanded. Lyra handed him a sealed packet. He read it, glanced at Daniel, and stepped aside without another word. Inside the outpost, the air was damp and smelled faintly of oil and salt. Narrow corridors twisted through the rock, lit by flickering strips of pale light. Voices echoed faintly from somewhere deep inside. Lyra led Daniel through the winding halls until they reached a small control room. A map flickered on the central display, showing red markers scattered across the nearby islands. "Raider activity," she explained. "We've been losing patrols for weeks. Yesterday, one of our supply barges went dark near here." She pointed to a red marker far from the outpost. "We're going to find it." Daniel studied the map. "Just the two of us." She smiled faintly. "Unless you're afraid." He shook his head. "Afraid isn't the same as stupid." An hour later, they were in a smaller skimmer, hugging the jagged coastline. The water here was darker, the cliffs higher. Daniel kept one hand on his weapon and the other on the railing, eyes scanning the rocks above. It didn't take long to find the barge. It was wedged against the shore, its hull scarred by energy blasts. No crew in sight. Lyra brought the skimmer alongside, and they climbed aboard. The deck was littered with scattered crates, some broken open. Daniel crouched beside one. The contents were gone. "They took everything," he said. "Not everything," Lyra replied. She was standing near the bridge, looking down at the deck. Daniel followed her gaze. There, partly hidden beneath a fallen tarp, was a body, human, male. He knelt beside the man, but it was too late. The wound was deep, clean, fatal. Still, something in the dead man's hand caught his attention. It was a scrap of fabric, torn and black, with a faint symbol burned into it. Lyra saw it too. Her eyes narrowed. "That mark belongs to the Dravik clans. They are not supposed to be this far north." Before Daniel could respond, the air filled with the low hum of engines. Shadows moved across the deck. 3 skiffs were approaching fast. From the cliffs, each one loaded with armed raiders. Daniel's instincts kicked in. Move. They dove behind a stack of crates as the first blasts tore into the deck. Splinters of metal and wood sprayed into the air. Lyra rolled to one side and returned fire with a quick, precise shot, hitting the lead skiff's pilot. The craft veered off course and slammed into the rocks. Daniel grabbed his rifle and took down to more raiders trying to board. The third skiff came in low, dropping a pair of grappling lines onto the barge. Raiders swarmed up the ropes. Lyra met them head-on, moving with the speed and precision of a trained killer. Daniel covered her from behind, each shot deliberate, each target falling before they could close and dot. It wasn't enough. More skiffs were coming. Too many. Lyra said between breaths, "We need to move." Daniel scanned the deck and spotted a narrow gap between the barge and the cliff, just wide enough for their skimmer to slip through if they were fast. "This way." They sprinted across the deck under a hail of gunfire, leaping into their skimmer as blasts scorched the hull. Daniel took the controls, pushing the craft to its limits. The engines roared, and they shot into the gap, the walls of the cliff rushing past on either side. Behind them, the raiders tried to follow, but their larger skiffs couldn't match the speed or fit through the narrow passage. By the time the skimmer burst back into open water, they were alone again. Only then did Daniel slow down. His pulse was still pounding, but his voice was steady. "That's what it means to be human," he said. "You look for the smallest chance and you take it. You don't wait for the perfect plan. You move or you die." Lyra didn't answer right away. She was staring at the horizon, her jaw tight. Finally, she said, "I understand, and I think I like it." Daniel wasn't sure if that was good news or the start of something worse. The council chamber was quieter than Daniel had ever heard it. The usual low hum of discussion was gone, replaced by a stillness that made every breath sound loud. He stood near the center with Lyra beside him, both facing the half-circle of elders. Sroth was there too, her expression unreadable, hands clasped behind her back. The mission report had been brief to brief. It mentioned the raider attack, the destroyed skiffs, the recovered cargo manifest. It didn't mention the dead human they'd found, or the Dravik symbol burned into the cloth in his hand. That detail had been left out, deliberately. An elder, with pale silver eyes, leaned forward. Lyra, you have now spent 2 weeks under human influence. What is your assessment? Daniel didn't expect her to answer right away, but she did. He acts fast. He protects first, questions later. He values life, even when it costs him. Some of the elders exchanged skeptical glances. One of them spoke in a slow, almost scornful tone. That is not strength. That is recklessness disguised as virtue. Lyra didn't look away. It is both, and both are useful. Daniel kept silent, watching their faces. The lines between curiosity and distrust were clear. Half of them wanted to believe her. Half were waiting for her to fail. The silver-eyed elder shifted his gaze to Daniel. You have been targeted twice since your arrival. Do you believe it is coincidence? Daniel's jaw tightened. No. Then you understand why some here call your presence a threat. Surath stepped forward then, her voice calm but edged. With steel. He is here because we need to understand humans, and because humans will not remain neutral forever. They will either stand with us or against us. And you want them to stand with us? One elder asked. Yes, Surath said. Without hesitation, the elder's gaze moved back to Daniel. Then perhaps you should know something your wife has not told you. Surath's eyes narrowed. This is not but the elder cut her off. The Dravik are not acting alone. They were paid, and the one who paid them sits within these walls. The air in the chamber went colder. Daniel could almost feel the shift in attention, the way glances darted between elders, the sudden tension in the guards at the doors. Lyra's voice was low, but it carried. No answer came. The silver-eyed elder only sat back, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. That was when Daniel understood. The attack at the outpost, the assassin in the tower, the ambush in the lower district, none of it had been meant to kill him outright. It had been meant to scare him into making a mistake, or to scare Lyra into rejecting his way of thinking. When the council dismissed them, Surath led him into a private corridor high in the tower. She walked fast, her voice low. You should have left with the transport yesterday. This is no longer training. It's a hunt. I figured that out, Daniel said. What I haven't figured out is why you kept me in the dark. Surath stopped and turned to face him. Because if I told you everything, you would act differently. And I needed them to see you act without hesitation. I needed you to be human. Lyra caught up to them then, eyes bright. We can use this, if they want him to fail. Then we show them he won't. Surath's gaze flicked to her sister. You're too eager. That eagerness will get you killed, and your caution will get him killed. Lyra shot back. Daniel raised a hand. Enough. If we're going to stop whoever's behind this, we start by finding the Dravik base. They didn't just happen to be at that outpost. They were placed there. Surath hesitated. You think it's a trap? I know it is, Daniel said. The question is, who's holding the other end of the rope? That night Daniel stayed awake long after the tower had gone silent. He stood by the window, looking down at the black water far below. Somewhere out there, in the maze of islands and currents, someone was waiting for him, not to fight him, to prove something about him. The door to his quarters slid open quietly, and Lyra stepped inside. She was dressed for travel, light armor, hair tied back. We leave before dawn, she said. Daniel frowned. She nodded. I found something. The Dravik ship that hit us at the outpost refueled on an island 30 clicks from here. It's off patrol routes. If we move now, we can reach it before they scatter. And what does Surath think about this? She doesn't know. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then reached for his jacket. Then we'd better be quick. They slipped out of the tower without raising an alarm, taking a small, unmarked skimmer from a service dock. The sea was calm under the twin moons, the sky scattered with stars. For the first hour, neither spoke. Then Lyra said quietly, if the Dravik have a message for me, I want to hear it directly. You think this is about you? Daniel asked. It's about both of us, she replied. But if they can convince me you're a liability, the council will never stand with humans. Daniel didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the dark horizon, where a faint, pulsing light marked the shape of an island dot as they drew closer. The light vanished. The island ahead was nothing but jagged rock and shadow. Daniel slowed the skimmer, the hum of the engine dropping to a whisper. Then he saw it, a single red glimmer deep in the cliffs. A sensor, maybe, or an eye watching them. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct that came before trouble. "Stay sharp," he murmured. They were almost to the shore when the water around them erupted in light. Figures rose. From the dark sea, armored and armed, surrounding them on all sides, Lyra gripped her weapon. "Looks like they were waiting." Daniel allowed himself the smallest smile. "Good. Saves us the trouble of finding them." The sea glowed faintly from the lights of the raiders' armor, each figure cutting a black silhouette against the moonlit waves. They closed in on the skimmer in a slow, deliberate circle. Weapons raised but not firing. It was the kind of approach Daniel had seen before. They wanted him alive. One of the Draviks stepped forward, the water lapping against his chest. His armor was darker than the others, his helmet marked with the same burned symbol Daniel had found in the dead man's hand at the outpost. "You're far from your city, human." The voice rasped through a modulator, too far for anyone to save you. Daniel kept his hands loose at his sides, not reaching for his weapon. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We don't wait to be saved." The Dravik leader tilted his head, amused. "Brave or stupid, your people call it courage. We call it waste." Lyra's rifle came up in one smooth motion, but Daniel touched her arm. "Not yet." The leader gestured, and two raiders climbed aboard the skimmer. They searched quickly, finding nothing worth taking except the locator device in Daniel's pocket. One of them tossed it into the sea. "You've been used," the leader continued. "Your wife's council paid us to push you. They wanted to see you break, and when you didn't, they wanted you dead. But we have another offer." Daniel didn't answer, but his eyes flicked to Lyra. She was listening, expression unreadable. The Dravik stepped closer. "Leave with us now. Tell the council your kind is too dangerous to trust. We will spare your life, and hers." Lyra's jaw tightened. "You're wasting your breath." The leader chuckled, a dry, cold sound. "Then perhaps the girl needs a demonstration." He gestured again, and one of the raiders leveled a weapon at her chest. Daniel moved before the shot could be fired. His hand closed on the weapon's barrel, twisting it aside as he drove his shoulder into the raider's ribs. The blast went wide, searing the air above the water. In the same instant, Lyra spun, kicking the second raider over the side. The leader drew a blade, fast and precise, but Daniel met him with the full weight of the staff weapon he'd hidden under the skimmer's bench. The first strike knocked the blade from the Dravik's hand. The second sent him stumbling back into the water. "Now," Daniel said, and Lyra opened fire. The sea exploded in light and sound. Raiders dropped beneath the waves, their armor sinking like stones. Daniel fought with sharp, controlled movements, every strike aimed to disable before the next threat appeared. Lyra moved with him, covering his blind spots, her fire cutting down anyone who tried to flank them. When the last of the raiders fled into the darkness, the leader was still in the water, chest heaving, glaring at Daniel through the cracked visor of his helmet. "This isn't over," he spat. "No," Daniel said, "it's just starting." He swung the staff, catching the leader under the chin and sending him under for good. By the time they reached the city again, the sky was beginning to pale. Word of the fight had already spread. Sarath was waiting at the dock, her expression a storm barely held in check. "You disobeyed me," she said, her voice quiet but cutting. Daniel stepped off the skimmer, soaked and bruised, but standing tall, and because of that, "We know who's been pulling the strings." The walk to the council chamber felt longer than usual. Lyra carried the leader's broken visor under her arm. The Dravik symbol burned into its side for all to see. Inside, the elders sat in their half-circle, their robes whispering against the floor as they shifted. The silver-eyed elder was there, calm as ever. Daniel dropped the visor onto the black stone table. It spun once before coming to rest, the crack across its surface catching the light. "The Dravik say someone here paid them to hunt me, to test me, to kill me if I passed. I think you already know which one of you it was." A ripple of murmurs. Spread through the chamber, the silver-eyed elder's faint smile didn't fade. Accusations without proof are meaningless. Lyra stepped forward. The proof is that we came back alive. He was given every chance to fail, and he didn't. That means the Council's fear is misplaced. Humans aren't a weakness. They are the strength we've been missing. Her voice rang through the chamber, young but steady. If your fear of change blinds you to that truth, then you are the real danger to our people. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sarath stepped to Daniel's side. I stand with them. One by one, a few elders gave small nods. Others said nothing, but their silence was telling. The balance in the room had shifted, not completely, but enough. The silver-eyed elder leaned back, studying Daniel. Perhaps we have misjudged. For now, it wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a foothold. When the session ended, Daniel walked out into the pale morning light. Lyra was beside him, quiet for once. Sarath followed, her steps measured. On the steps of the tower, a courier intercepted Daniel with a sealed message. He broke the seal, reading the single line inside. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Daniel folded the message and slipped it into his pocket. The city stretched out before him. The ocean beyond. Somewhere out there, more storms were waiting. And for the first time since he'd arrived, he found himself smiling.